It's America's Forum on Newsmax TV. J.D. Hayworth here, Ed Berliner here, and John Bachman right there.
Guys, let's talk about that GM recall with the CEO testifying again on Capitol Hill today. 13 deaths have now been attributed to the faulty ignition switches in those GM vehicles. 2.6 million vehicles were recalled earlier this year due to that defect, and now a further 1.3 million have been recalled due to faulty power steering. Yesterday, GM CEO Mary Barra testified before Congress. One of the key issues or questions raised was over the timetable of events that led up to the recall.
I cannot tell you why it took so long for a safety defect to be announced for this program, but I can tell you we will find out.
Well, internal documents reveal that GM was first notified of the issue as early as 2001, but the study performed at the time warned against a recall because the cost would be too high. Under the terms of GM's federally mandated bankruptcy, it is immune to any product liability claims for crashes or other malfunctions dating before July 10, 2009. Now GM is coming under increasing pressure from lawmakers to establish a fund to compensate victims of accidents in recalled models.
Obviously, this is a situation that you're not only dealing with fatalities here in terms of 13 people, but you're dealing with a corporation that has had its share of controversy, GM oftentimes standing for government motors in the wake of that bailout of a couple of years ago. So what is the future of the car maker and what is the public perception? We're joined now by Republican strategist Phillip Stutts. Phillip, it is great to have you Skyping in today to America's Forum.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
Now, Phillip, congressional committee hearings in many ways resemble what goes on in a court of law. I mean, you have the situation where those who testify raise their right hand to tell the truth, and of course, there can be a substantial penalty for lying to members of Congress. But my first question is for you about the courtroom of public opinion, if you will. GM is a brand, the federal bailout, now this recall. What does GM do to try to gain a favorable verdict in the eyes of the car buying public?
It's a great question. I would start out by saying I'm 40 years old, and I remember the days on 60 Minutes where if Mike Wallace walked into your office, you had a problem. Well, GM has now said that Kenneth Feinberg is going to be doing the settlements. As you know, he did BP, he did the 9/11 fund, he's coming in to do GM. So from a public perception standpoint, they're in big time trouble. If Feinberg is involved, there's going to be problems ahead.
Is Feinberg the only guy that can do this? Because following up on your answer there, if you're GM, you're concerned about public opinion. You got the guy coming in here now who's been tied to the BP oil spill. How do they recover from this? You know, paying these people is one thing, but moving past that, and how do they deal with the consumer?
Listen, there's a few rules that we employ in political campaigns, and when we have people that are in office, is if something isn't right, you get it out there, fast, and you make it right. GM didn't do that, and so they have a big problem on their hands. Like, think about this. You went through some of the statistics over that 10, 12-year period. There were 133 complaints to the Department of Transportation about this issue. And then, you know, what's even more interesting on top of that is $49.5 billion with a B dollars that the government put into GM. And so you would think if you're going to put that much money into a company, you would know what's going on and where the problems lie, and you would have people all over that organization trying to figure this out. Either there was, you know, negligence on the part of the government, or, as we often see, a big bureaucracy that just can't handle an organization of that magnitude.
But Phillip, when you use the phrase "get it right," is it not fair to say that we are dealing here with a culture of hubris that General Motors has had for so many years, to where they still don't get it? And I'm going to point to something specific. There are those who believe they need to commit to disclosing the complete findings of the internal investigation from its finding on the ignition defect. In response to a question from Representative Paul Tonko, a Democrat from New York, Ms. Barra said the company would only, quote, make appropriate findings available. You have the families of dead people sitting right behind you, and you're telling them that we're not going to come clean. Again, that seems to me and a lot of people to be well-ingrained, decades-old hubris that we don't have to tell you everything because we're GM. Fair?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. It is the worst thing you can do to try to survive as a company. listen, let's take the horrible cost of life out of this. You have to be upfront. You have to be honest with the American people. Now you've got the lives that have passed away, 13 people that have passed from this specific issue, and they won't come clean. That is a huge problem. And I think you make an even better point that this is a bipartisan issue. This is not, from the right side, we'd look at to see from the government bailout, did that have anything to do with it? But you're seeing Republicans and Democrats both in the House yesterday and the Senate today that are coming out in full force asking for transparency, and they're still not getting it.
Well, let's go to another question of perception, Philip, and it is the rise of Mary Barra as the first woman CEO at GM. It would appear to me, as a veteran of political campaigns and trying to shape public opinion, that the fact that Mary prefaces her remarks as a wife and a mother, as well as the head of GM, we're very concerned. Is that going to sell? Is GM trying to ride that perception and that kind of the newness of Mary Barra in this job to alleviate some of the concerns that are out there?
Well, go back to your previous the previous question, which is she is a lifelong employee of GM. Is this a cultural issue within? While her apologies seem sincere, there's no substance behind it, JD, and so that's a problem. That's not only a problem for her, it's a problem for the families who've lost loved ones. Again, they are not running this appropriately, this campaign to try to scale back what's going on. They need to be forthright, they need to be honest, and fortunately for the company, they're going to have to pay a lot of money to settle this when they could have just paid 50 cents to fix the issue per month.
Well, Phillip Stutts, we appreciate your analysis, and it is something we will keep our eye on. We thank you for your time. We look forward to your next visit with us here on America's Forum.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Phillip brings up a great point. We talked about this yesterday. The due diligence that was done by the government before this money was furnished to GM. Did they know anything? And if they didn't know, how did they not know? And if they did know something, why did they go through in the first place?
They're going to fall back on saying, we didn't ask because we didn't think there was a problem. You have to investigate everything. And there was knowledge that there was already problems within the culture.
And that's the problem if they didn't ask. That's the problem right there.
So where do you stand on this issue? Let us know. You can get in touch with us via Twitter at NewsmaxTV, #AmericasForum. When we come back, your thoughts. It's America's Forum on Newsmax.